since we've covered the cleanup section of this image, we're gonna go on to a topic that I really like doing because it's something that I kind of have to do, but it also makes our images look really clean and puts a great polish on it when you do it properly. That is dodging and burning. If you're not familiar with dodging and burning, it's the step where we use to even out a lot of micro transitions. Let me just show you what that means instead of talking about it. I will first and foremost go ahead and hit Command S or Control S and save our layers so that we don't have a problem with it crashing and starting all over again. Again, you can save it as TIFF, PSD, whatever you want, depending on what your preference is. But I just saved it as TIFF and kept my layers there. So I will set up another folder here, and I will call this Dodge and Burn. So let's go ahead and set up our Dodge and Burn folders. Or I should say Dodge and Burn adjustment layers. The way that I like to dodge and burn is typically through curves. The reason I like curves the most in comparison to every other method that we're going to talk about as well is because curves also maintain saturation much more than any other method. So let's say you start evening out skin by brightening or darkening areas. Sometimes you have shifts in contrast and saturation where doing it through curves allows me to maintain that without ruining that, the initial colors that are in the base image. Let me give you an example. Let's go ahead and apply a curve layer here. I'm going to start with our dodge. The way that we do a dodge is we're going to bring the exposure up here, and I do this till I will get to the 150 mark. You can see output, it says 150. Some people do it less, some people do it more. Again, it's all relative to what you prefer. I like to keep it at 150 just because anytime I make any adjustments, it's gonna impact just enough where it's not gonna shift saturation. Some people claim that if you do it to 150, it's gonna still impact saturation a little bit, but for me, I haven't noticed that as much. And if that's the case in some images, I'll go back and change this and do another curve later or something like that. But for now, we'll keep it here. And if we have any issues, we'll talk about them as they come up, okay? So we have our curve set over here. I'm going to click on my mask, hit Command or Control I. If you're on a PC, it's Control. If you're on a Mac, it's Command. I'll name this Dodge. Well, as you notice, it doesn't do anything right now when I turn on and off my layer. It's because it's supposed to do nothing right now. I'm just setting it up, so keep that in mind. The next thing we'll do is we'll add a burn, and a burn adjustment layer is going to be just another curve, but brought down to say 105 or so, and I'll invert that, Command I, and I'll name this burn. So here we have our dodge and our burn. And I know you're still wondering, what exactly are we going to do with this if you're unfamiliar? If you're familiar, great. Keep paying attention to some of my method and processes as I talk about them. So let's take a look at this image. We have a couple of really easy areas to take care of this time, and that is going to be our under eyes over here. It's really dark. And some of these little areas here, these lines, I'm going to try and lighten them just a bit. And some of these little blotchy areas, and maybe some of this forehead here where there's transitioning happening. But ultimately, this is going to be a lesson in application and approach instead of fixing a ton of problems. Before I actually start dodging and burning, what I will do is create a black and white view. It's a helper layer. And what this helper layer is going to do is temporarily take out all the color from my image. That will allow me to focus specifically on the tonality and the gradations between black to white, so I know what I need to fix. When you throw color in the mix in a black and white image, your mind tends to stray quite a bit. It becomes a lot harder to differentiate whether an area is dark or if it's just another color. Sometimes that happens, and that's why we have these helper layers. Simply put, a helper layer is going to be a solid color adjustment layer. It's going to be set to black. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to reset that to color. And that turns my image into a grayscale image where I can see the tonal differences. Another option is going to my black and white and doing that. But as you can see, if I use just my black and white, you'll notice that it's a lot different than if I use my color fill layer. And the reason for that is the way that the color fill layer here interprets how it should be converted into black and white is more closely related to the luminosity of that particular color. Let me give you a quick example. Let me set a new document here, and this is going to be really fun. I will set a few colors. And I'm going to quickly adjust my hardness here. And my opacity and flow. And just quickly go in and select a few colors that are differing in saturation and brightness and how our eye perceives different shades. All right, so let's pick maybe a pink, fuchsia, magenta, whatever you want to call it. And maybe one more, which is going to be yellow. That's not yellow, that's like lime. Let's do yellow, there we go. Okay, that's not perfect, but whatever. We're gonna go in and do that same thing we did here with our black, and we set it to color. If I turn this on and off, there's one thing that I want you to pay attention to, and it's the fact that the yellow itself is the brightest color visually. When you look at this image, you'll notice that yellow is very bright. It's a bright color, and that's the best way that I know how to explain this. When I learned this and first was taught this concept, I was really blown away, and I saw a lot of people start using this a lot more, and by no means do I ever take credit for finding this out, but the fact that discovering this was something that changed my workflow quite a bit. And I think it's important to talk about this because a lot of people still use the black and white adjustment layer. And as you can see here, when I turn the black and white adjustment layer on and off, the yellow itself, in turn, when it comes to tonality, seems to show the colors that are a lot more closer to each other than they actually are. Yellow shouldn't be that dark when it comes to visual representation. So you can see also that when you look at blue or green and cyan or blue, whatever you want to call it, it's close. You can see that purple, even though it's a dark color, visually it's a light color, and yellow is a darker color than the purple, even though that's not the case, visually speaking. But when I turn on my color fill layer, you can see the differentiation between shades or tones is much more accurate when it comes to luminosity. So that's why I end up picking my color fill layer over the black and white. So let's turn those two off, and I'll exit this really quickly and go into my image. And again, same principle. When I use my black and white, it's going to be different than my color fill. You can see when I turn the color fill on, the lip shade, the background, some of the skin tones are more accurately reflected. When I turn this bottom one on, it nulls the top one, so don't worry about that. I'm just showing you the difference. So you can see this is the black and white view with the black and white adjustment layer. And when I do just the color fill layer, you can see the difference. So that's why I use that as my helper layer. So I'll keep those three on here, my color fill, my dodge and burn. Now that we have that set up and out of the way, you can see that our first process and order of operation is we're going to be dodging. So let's zoom out and take a look at some of the problem areas that we are facing in this particular image. And you'll notice that, as we mentioned in our game plan, which is really important, is that we have these under eye areas that are really annoying, and I kind of want to lighten them up. Not 100%. I don't want to make it look like she's a mannequin. I want to keep her real, but I want to lessen that impact. So I'll click on my mask. I'll click on my regular brush. When I dodge and burn, I always keep my hardness at 0%. and my brush size with Q and W will change. My flow will go back to 1%, and I'm going to rotate here. I'm going to rotate on its side. And I'm going to rotate on its side because I like working in vertical strokes instead of horizontal ones. It's easier on the hand. When you look at your hand, when you can see the way that your hand pivots up and down, it's a lot more stable. It's like a stabilizer, right? And if you go left and right, it becomes a lot harder to work on just because your wrist is at a particular position where it's not as comfortable. And for me, my hand likes to pivot up and down instead of left and right. So that's just my personal preference. I know a lot of people who don't rotate, and that's fine as well. So I'll take my brush and make sure that I'm on my mask and the mask is highlighted. And I'm gonna simply go in and cover this like so. And you see when I turn it on and off, it lightens it up just enough where it's not as obvious. And I'll do the same here. And I'll keep my brush stroke the size of the actual area that I want to fix. I'm not going to overdo it. And the reason for that is if I go over and make my brush a lot bigger than the area, you'll see what happens is that areas that are not the ones that I want to fix get brighter as well. And that doesn't look good. You can see these areas under the dark areas getting lighter. And that's not something I want to happen. If that does happen, I quickly hit X, change my black brush, and just fix the areas that I went too far in. In case you really mess up, just click on a flow of 100 with a black brush and cover up the tracks that you've made. So again, switch to my white brush, flow of 1% or 2% for me. And then I'll just go over with a few strokes. You can see I'm not doing a lot of strokes. It's just 4 or 5 strokes in every area. And the goal is for portraits, keeping it natural, so I'm not going to go too far. And just doing that. You can see that the under eyes are natural and all the texture still preserved, which is the bonus. You can also do the same technique going into some of these finer lines. Let's say that I want to just lighten up some of these little dark lines here. So I'll do the same thing. So I'll just quickly touch upon the burrow here, the smile line. I'm not going to take it off completely because that might not look great. But you can see the distance that I go of just... I hate the word smoothing, but that's kind of what's happening. It's evening out the shadow area. So it's not as intense, but you still get the idea that she's smiling. And she's, you can see there's cheek muscles here that are being pulled up. And that happens when you smile. I mean, when someone's smiling, you see some of the cheek muscles and you want to keep that. You don't want to make it all flat. Otherwise, it looks like she has Botox. And let's face it, you don't want to do that if you're not sure how it's going to relate to anatomy. This technique is also great because it forces you to not go too far. It stops you from overdoing some things. And I like that. It keeps it natural. And when you have images that capture a lot of detail, you don't want to over smooth anything, I think. It will become really obvious and really unpleasant. It allows me to also take care of some of these dark parts here. Let me turn that on and off so you can see. So again, just kind of lightening that up. And I noticed there was this little indentation here that's really dark. I'll just come in with my brush and lighten that up. Again, if you go too far, use a black brush and redo it. The best lesson is always practice. If you're new to dodge and burn, obviously, you're going to mess up a lot more than you're going to get it right. So don't be frustrated. I think it took me 2 or 3 years to perfect the practice. I remember it took a week to get comfortable using the tools itself, and it took a long time to master it. So it becomes really fun when you get used to it because it feels like you're carving. And with portraits, you don't have to do too much. It's a good starting way to practicing dodge and burn. You can see the lip now is a lot better when it comes to those really, really dark areas. Let's also work on some of these smaller patches of skin that are dark. Just a couple of quick strokes. You want to make sure that the brush itself, again, is the size of the actual patch and not bigger. So if you are seeing halos around your patches, make your brush smaller, do less strokes. It's a self-analysis thing. You have to just pay attention to what's happening, turn your layer on and off, and continue on working. So let's continue here. Just some more areas, not too much. We can also do it to lighten up some of these red lines in the eyes. I bet you're asking what or when should you use dodge and burn over healing? Well, I always feel like when you can get away with it, healing would be optimal. But there are situations where you're just trying to lighten something, and that's when you know you want to use your dodge and burn because it keeps the texture intact. And if you don't like a texture of a particular situation, healing would be a good instance to use it. If there are instances where you can do both, then you can use either, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's perfectly fine. You can also use the dodge and burn to add light to larger areas. So for instance, if I want to add light, more light into some of the eyes, and I get that request sometimes, you can use just a bigger brush. And the same principle applies. Just quickly go in and add a few strokes. Ultimately, you should do it on another adjustment layer. You set up another dodge layer and do it there, or on the same one, depending on your style. Again, with portraits, it's not necessary that you do lighten the eyes. I know some people say that they do lighten the eyes, some people don't. I'm not one to tell you what to do, but at least you know how to do it and when to do it, I think is ultimately your decision. When it comes to clients itself, they typically will like to lighten them just a little bit, and they will tell me to take out some of the redness in the whites of the eyes. I think that's a key determining factor. You also see areas on the neck in portraits that, even though this one's out of focus, I will just do a touch because I can see a little hint of it, but you can keep them as well. These lines on the chin, I will take away as well, just a little bit of it. And over here on the sides. You can also do the same thing in case you have any issues with the eyeshadow. And there you have it. If you want to see the work that you've done, you can obviously click on the eye itself, and you've seen the areas that we've gone over, which is the lip, the under eyes. You can see the sides of the mouth, and the eyes itself. You can also click on Option or Alt and click on your mask, and you see some of the work that we've done on the mask itself. When it comes to the burning stage over here, I don't always use them. Sometimes I only use dodge. But the burning stage is the inverse effect. If there are any areas that need to be filled in that are too bright, I will use it there. Maybe here under the eye at the bottom where you see some of the glow. You could do that if you want to taper that down. And over here, you can see some of that being filled in. You can see that there are tiny little white patches on the top of the eyebrow, or I should say in the eyeshadow itself. So I'm going to go in and quickly fill that in with my brush, and I turn that on and off. You can see just little hints of that. It's not really noticeable, but I'm just essentially giving you ideas on what to do with it. So let's take a look at what we have here. I'm going to turn off my color fill layer. And as I turn off my dodge, you can see that the under eyes are nicely filled in. You can see that some of the sides of her mouth are really nicely touched up, not overdone. And we're going for a really clean and classic look in this example. We've also covered some of the lip area here. You've seen that we've dodged to soften that up. And the one last thing that I want to do is the lip area here. You see that there are some gaps that are brighter. This is something that we can use our burn tool for, or burn, I shouldn't say burn tool, the burn adjustment layer. And we can fill that in really gently using 1% flow again. That's my technique. I know some people who use a smaller curve and just a higher flow, depending on your style. I think for me this works the best because it's quick. It's not as hard to do, I think. Here we go. So I turn that on and off. You can see that part is filled. So that takes care of the luminosity issues. Now with dodge and burn, you always have some kind of color cast that happen. And the way to compensate for that is I can click on a new blank layer here, set it to color. Now, let's say for example, we've dodged and burned our lip. We want to fill that in and make sure that color is even without changing the texture. So what I'll do is with this blank layer, with it being set to color, I'm going to click on my brush, my regular paintbrush, and I'll set a flow of 10%. I'm going to hit Option and sample a color, say nearby the lip. And then I'm simply going to brush over that desaturated area. And as you can see, what we've done is something really nice, is we have added that color and saturation back into the lip, matching the rest of it. So even though in our burn layer, we've darkened it up, you can see that that desaturated bit can match in terms of color. The same thing goes for the under eyes here. I can come up here. You can see that the color itself is a little bit different, so I'll sample under the eye. I'll set a flow of 5% by hitting 0.5 on my keyboard and then quickly just brushing it in. And what that tends to do is it just adds some of that color back into the under eye that would initially be there if it was lighter, matching the skin from every portion. And the same thing can be done with variations over the skin tone. So if I see red collarbones, I can fix that by sampling and quickly just painting. So there you have it. This dodge and burn stage accompanies the cleaning and healing stage that we did previously to complete a clean and classic portrait retouching style. Now in the next section, we're going to talk about color toning as it relates to portraiture.